Yes, yes, yes. Hello, people. My name is Mensal Kibalan. I am a tech lead at Universal Equations. Today, we're just going to take a few minutes to talk about API integration. We actually have an example for you. This is an example taken from WordPress, because some of you may know that they have a WP REST endpoint that API that you can use to pull and manipulate data within your WordPress instance. Now we're just going to do a very simple example of this, just for people just to get an idea of how this sort of thing works. What you see in your screen is something called Postman. That is a very popular tool that developers use in order to test APIs and see how certain things work. So if you're not familiar with this, then this is I guess another opportunity. This is an opportunity along with the present conversation to see how this tool works. So I probably should give you some kind of introduction to API integration. We'll talk about we can't talk about APIs without talking about something called REST. Some of you may also be familiar with SOAP, since at this time it's I'd probably say around 70% of the APIs now are REST. I don't think we need to talk about SOAP in this conversation. So I'm sorry for the SOAP people. Maybe at one point we'll talk about SOAP in another discussion. But what we're talking about REST, REST is short for something called representational state transfer. This was actually a concept, an architectural style that was developed from a PhD, a dissertation at, I want to say that was University of California at the turn, close to the turn of the millennium. Like I said, I don't want to go too deep into that. Um, into the specifics of that, but you do have to know about it. You do, if someone says arrest, you do gotta have an idea of what that is when we're talking about APIs. So one of the concepts that came out of REST is using the HTTP methods in order to access web service functionality. Right. So that brings us to very close to where we are now. APIs. This is application programming interface. That's what that stands for. It's basically an interface to where data can be shared across within and across organizations. Right. And I've greatly simplified that. We can definitely get a lot deeper into that. I'll give you some companies to look up. And again, they don't pay me to give them shout outs, but if you want to know a lot more about APIs, I look up a company like MuleSoft. Um, and also even company, I guess MuleSoft may be more of an enterprise service provider. Trade.o may be one that's maybe not so enterprise. I don't know. I'll let y'all decide that whether Trade.io is for SMBs or not, or even MuleSoft, if that's for small and medium sized businesses or not. But these are two different companies that we can easily associate with APIs. So before we get to this example, the next step, I guess, in the conversation of APIs is what with anything. I mean, what is it? What is it good for? So with that, some of you may have heard of something called digital transformation, which is something else that I'll greatly simplify. And that's basically taking processes within an organization and streamlining them, speeding them up, um, with the intent of trying to improve the customer experience as well as making your employees more productive. So that is the process or journey by which companies do that. Some are further along than others, um, and some have more, resources or more of an investment in that journey than others, obviously. So, what does APIs have to do with that? So, APIs can be one of the key enablers of a digital transformation journey. And again, I'm going through this stuff really fast. At some point, we'll go through each piece of this in more detail. Hopefully, we get well, at least hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do that, to dive deeper into certain aspects. So, in talking about APIs, we talk about things called API integrations. So this goes a little bit deeper. So with API integrations, what happens is you may have systems within your organization or applications within your organization that you want to share data. You may have a business case to where you may want them to share data with each other, in which case you may need an API integration for that. Now, what happens is the consideration you have to make is, do I build one? Do I invest the time, resources, etc., into building one? You may say, you know what? Let's look into the market to see if there is a pre-built integration. And obviously, there's a middle course you can take where you say maybe there's not a pre-built integration, but there may be an API integration tool that I can use to speed up the process of actually building one. All right. So you have things throughout that spectrum. Like I said, that's where you look at people like MuleSoft and Trade.io, and a lot of other companies that provide those kinds of services. Right. So I think we've talked about APIs. We've talked about API integrations. We talked about some of the value that companies find in API integrations. So what I would like to do is just show you an example of one, and then we can talk about, once we see some of the data that you can pull from an API integration, then you can start thinking about, okay, what would this sort of thing be used for? Use some of your imagination. Because I can tell you it's useful, but it's better for the organization or team itself to say, oh yeah, this is it. This is how we can, this is how we can find this useful, right? Then I'm not selling it to you. You're selling yourself on the value of API integrations or specific API integrations. So, like I said, WordPress, I figured I'd use this because it's very popular and very easy to demonstrate. WordPress has a WP REST API that you can use to, like I said, pull data as well as manipulate data. You can create users, create comments, etc. We won't be creating users or comments on other people's WordPress sites. Um, and what we'll see here is with some people's WordPress sites, you can't even pull data, let alone manipulate the data. So there are security features. You may have to do some kind of authentication in order to use the WordPress sites. But some folks may not be as sensitive about you pulling data off their sites. And unitaid.org, that is an example of a website where they don't appear to mind if you pull data from their site. But like I said, if I tried to manipulate if I tried to create users and comments, then it probably wouldn't allow me to do that. So here's Postman. This is a GET request, HTTP GET. You notice that here. This is an endpoint. Like I said, there's no fancy authentication that needs to take place. Here, I'm just pulling the data, and we'll see what we wind up getting. So here's just an example of some of the data that you'll get. This is a post from the unitaid.org site. I would invite you to take this URL and put it in your browser to see what you get. For the sake of time, I won't do that. But yeah, this is just one of the posts from the site, and this is some of the data, some of the content, and this is just some of the things you can do. Right. So, like I said, if you this is unitaid.org. Let's go to a site like Walt Disney, WaltDisneyCompany.com. Let me try to do the same thing there. Not going to happen. Only authenticated users can access the REST API. So you are able to lock down access to certain parts or to certain data within that site. You may have very good reasons to do that, right? So this is just pulling the data. Like I said, if we could do a post, we can go from get to post and actually start. If we had uh, the credentials or the ability to authenticate, we could actually go in and manipulate data, create users, create comments, create categories, create tags, etc. So um, let me give you just some really basic examples of how this could be useful. Now, JSON is not the only thing we like to use. Sometimes we use GraphQL. Now, to do that, you would need to do a little more work with plugins, etc. You also have things like WP webhooks, where you can actually install a plugin that gives you access to WordPress webhooks. For example, if you create a post or create a user or create a comment, then maybe there's a web host that can push data to a certain API endpoint, kicks off some kind of business process that you want to happen, etc. So I'm saying these things because I want to start to stimulate your imagination to think about, okay, what kind of business processes would you want to create where you would want that kind of data? What kind of value could you get out of that? Because when you're an API developer or API designer, these are the kinds of things that you think about a lot, and you may get a lot of ideas from the business side of things to say, okay, can we do this? And with your knowledge of how the APIs work, you can say yes, we can. You can give a good idea of how long it would take, etc. They can make on the business side, they can think about, okay, is this from a business standpoint, is this worth it? And then they can make a decision, right? So again, let me give you some easy ones. Some of you the front end developers may be familiar with um, a platform like a REST-based platform called Gatsby.js, right? So with Gatsby.js, they have a plugin where you can source web WordPress content from WordPress into Gatsby.js, right? So that's very easy to understand, right? So you're pulling post data, etc., into WordPress JS. Like I said, this is not necessarily JSON. This is GraphQL, right? So it's not just JSON. There's different data formats. In this case, it would be um, GraphQL, which is kind of um, that's a whole other conversation. But just think of it as another data format in which you can pull data and query because you see the QL at the end. You can query data from WordPress and create pages with it if that's what you choose to do. So another REST-based framework, Next.js, kind of the same deal. You can use a GraphQL endpoint from your WordPress instance, pull data, create pages. Okay, very simple, right? Because let's say you wanted to, redo the front end of your site, not a problem. Whether it's like I said, Gatsby.js or um, React.js, or you can do it for any website. But those are two. I say any. I should be specific. A Jamstack, or we typically associate GraphQL with the Jamstack platforms. But you can definitely pull the data, pull out what you want from the data, and create pages with it. You can do that if you wanted to create another front end for your WordPress site. I mean, that's for a front end developer, that's not very difficult to understand. Now, but then you get into other API integrations, which are not so straightforward. And let me just give you a couple, so you can start to think of, okay, what are just to start to stimulate your thinking. Okay, so why would people want to do this? All right, MongoDB, right? You may want to take WordPress data and put it into MongoDB. Maybe you want to bi-directional sync, right? One use case, right? Having all your post data, maybe all your user data, comment data into MongoDB. Maybe for some reason you want to take the data out of MongoDB as opposed to out of WordPress. Or maybe you want to take it out of WordPress permanently, or extract it from WordPress permanently, some kind of migration, put it in MongoDB, and then have some API calls or some functionality that accesses MongoDB and pulls the data from there, has some use case for it. Let me give you a couple other ones. You have DocuSign. That could be another one. Again, I'm just trying to your stimulate your imagination, your API imagination. Think of another one. See, we said MongoDB. We have DocuSign, um, ADP, SharePoint. That may be an integration that you want. And I'll try to think of one or two more that you could find some use for. We said MongoDB. We said DocuSign. Oh, Yotpo. Yotpo is one. That's the one for reviews. So you got Up viral may be one. So again, you have endpoints, and again, this is to stimulate your imagination. You have endpoints, right? If authenticated, right? You can create posts, create contacts, create comments, create WordPress tags, create categories, right? A big one, I can't believe I forgot this, Pipedrive, the CRM. You may want to have some sort of API integration between Pipedrive and WordPress, right? Maybe you want to create contacts in Pipedrive via some activity that happens in WordPress, etc. So just gives you an example of some of the things you can do with an API integration with WordPress, right? So this is just WordPress. So then you get into the API economy. There's some companies that earn revenue through their API economy. They get 25, 35% of revenue from their API alone. So you're getting to see what API integration is about in terms of the digital transformation within your organization, API integration, which becomes a part of your revenue stream for your company. So, I love to go deeper into all these things, but I can't because my time is running out. But I think you got to get the idea, and I can always say, like I always say, hopefully we'll get a chance to come back to this stuff later and dive deeper into some of these subtopics. But as like I said, my time is up. Feel free to either click the subscribe button, and or click the like button to get this content flowing more frequently. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Peace.